Well, good morning, everybody. Hopefully folks are doing well. I'm Mike Fong, the director for the Washington State Department of Commerce, and I get the pleasure of being today's warm-up act to get the show on the road. So it's good to see everyone. I see a lot. Oh, thank you. I just rolled in about 20 minutes ago, but I already see a lot of familiar faces and friends in the room, and it's always great for me because Spokane is my hometown, so it's always fun to come home and also see so many friendly faces. So I have been in this role for about 17 months, and I remember when I first met with Governor Inslee and his team about this job about a year and a half ago, and the Gov very matter-of-factly described to me, well, the goals for this agency are to address climate change, tackle the affordable housing crisis, grow the economy and create jobs, plan for growth and meet our future infrastructure needs, get the state broadband network built out. And then I foolishly asked him, that's it? Nothing more? And that proved to be the wrong question, because then he proceeded to articulate additional goals, including a very critical one about centering equity in all of the work across all our portfolio. And given that, I like to describe that our agency is rather unique in our footprint. And most agency directors would probably do the same, but us having very little actual direct service delivery, a prerequisite and foundational to our work are partnerships and collaboration with nonprofits, industry, academia, local government. We would not be able to accomplish that portfolio of work or make headway without having really a deep appreciation for the leverage of the human capital, funding, resources across the state. And I think that's particularly relevant in the context of the work you all are doing around affordable housing and the parallels in terms of capital stacking and leveraging and the ideation and the creative thinking you all need to do to make headway on this significant crisis. And a crisis it in fact is. I have traveled to 22 counties in the last 17 months, and there really hasn't been a single local jurisdiction that I visited where affordable housing hasn't come up, if not first or second on the list of local top priorities. And the data also bears that out, and all the data points point to the need to really elevate and create that sense of urgency and focus around this issue that you all have been spending such meaningful time together over the last couple of days. We have our 1.1 million new homes that we need to create in the next 20 years in order to accommodate growth, of which year-over-year numbers, we've only had 37,000 in the pipeline of permits from last July to this July. So already, year two of our analysis, we're already behind schedule. 200,000 of our Washingtonians are experiencing homelessness or living through housing instability, a record level for our state. Two-bedroom apartment rents in the range that someone in Washington State would need to earn $40 an hour to be able to afford. Current average wage earning for a renter in Washington State is about $29 an hour. So all this to say that this work really is critical and requires us to think bold, think creatively, think innovatively, dare to dream about what is possible. And each and every day, this portfolio of work that we have at Commerce enables us to do that, enables us to work with you to look for those opportunities, to think big, to ideate together, to make the meaningful progress that we simply have to. And that is also reflected in the budget that we just submitted to the governor's office for consideration. To the chagrin of probably the Office of Financial Management, we have decided that in spite of incredible challenges in the budget landscape for Washington State, my team and I are proposing significant investments in affordable housing, both in capital, operating, and other wraparound supports. And a few of those highlights include the largest ever request for capital funding for affordable housing construction at $1.2 billion for the biennium. It includes $400 million for operating support, in additional operating support, given inflation, maintenance cost, operating costs that we've seen so many providers across the state articulate and see challenges with. We're also committed to recognizing that capital costs associated with housing construction go beyond just the housing project itself, but to the infrastructure that necessitates and enables that housing to happen. So we've asked for $100 million to continue our CHIP program, and we've also proposed a new program to look at the possibility to incentivize affordable housing through reimbursing a portion of impact fees. So we are trying to look at new ways that we can support the full capital stack to make these projects go, and hopefully with some of these tools in place, we can help making that progress that we need to make to really address this housing crisis across Washington State. At the same time, I want to emphasize that we take very seriously our commitment, our state commitment to be a pro-equity, anti-racist organization, and we have centered that in the work and in our budget as a reflection of our core values. We will continue to move forward with our commitments to fund, build capacity, and bring in more buy-in for organizations. We'll continue to look at investing in home ownership opportunities for communities of color. I want to congratulate the Housing Finance Commission on their incredible work around the Covenant Home Ownership Program and the launch of that program, and we stand with you every step of the way to make sure that that's successful and continue to make home ownership a cornerstone of the full housing portfolio of Department of Commerce. But I just want to close because sometimes this work can not only be incredibly challenging, but particularly for the folks in government, it can be isolating and sometimes feel like you're trapped in the sea of bureaucracy that stands in the way of potential meaningful progress. And I don't say it enough, but no better crowd to do it than in front of all of you, that the hardworking staff at the State Department of Commerce work every day to try to make and build a stronger ecosystem, to work through multiple challenges and a range of diverse opinion, as undoubtedly you all have heard even amongst each other this last couple of days, but they do exceptional work. And I am incredibly proud of what they do for this community. And for my housing division folks that are in the room, can you please stand really quickly? So I want folks in this room to acknowledge them and their hard work and what they do for Washington State. So in closing, again, thank you for the time and your commitment to this incredible mission and this incredible work that you all are doing together. Thank you for taking a couple days out of your busy schedule out to continue to think about how we can make meaningful progress on the housing crisis. And I have the great privilege to introduce your keynote for this morning. I think, given the context of your discussions, is incredibly timely for the message and the story and the focus that I know he's going to share in his remarks. Ben Jealous is currently the executive director of the Sierra Club. Previous to that, in 2008 to 2013, he was the youngest president ever for the NAACP. He's a New York Times best-selling author whose advocacy around social justice spans decades. Now, I had a chance to listen a little bit to Director Jealous's interviews and speeches online a little bit, and of the little that I have been able to take in, I think folks are going to be really, really impressed, really, really inspired by his message, particularly in a time when our public discourse is so divisive and we face so many challenges, that his message of finding common ground, rooted in his own personal story and history, developing those bridges that can make meaningful impact, and thinking about how we can make a difference around commonalities and shared interests. I will quote one line that he shared in an interview about, "We have unfinished business together around our democracy, building a better life for our families and future generations." Well, I don't think that could be much more poignant than to the relevancy of the topic here today. So without further ado, Mr. Ben Jealous.
And let's hear it again for our Commerce Secretary. Well, good morning. What a joy to be back in Spokane. Last time I was here, I was protected by 24 federal agents. The Martin Luther King Day parade that year, it may have been 2012 or 2013, they all blend together. They found a backpack full of nails with plastic explosives in it. And they came back to lead a march against fear with the then mayor of Spokane. Tough times, and yet not unique to this corner of the country. For almost my entire adult life, they've been saying that this is the most divided time in America since the eve of the Civil War. And I come from one of those families where the Civil War is still talked about. My mama's family is from Petersburg, Virginia. I wrote a book, came out last year, Never Forget Our People Were Always Free, a parable of American healing. In the context of that book, I discovered that Robert E. Lee was my cousin. Some things no former head of the NAACP is ever prepared to discover. It cost me a week of my life and a bottle of whiskey I'll never get back. And yet it drove home what Dr. King told all of us. And we are interconnected in a single garment of destiny. I cannot be the best I can be unless you can be the best you can be, and you cannot be the best you can be unless I can be the best I can be. And as public servants, that is our calling, that is our mission. Whether we serve communities and nonprofits or we serve them in government, our job is to unleash the great potential of the greatest democracy the world has ever known. And when it comes to housing, you have to contend with all of it. I spent 4 years of my life, all through college, helping a Section 8 administrator rebuild tenements in Harlem. 30 hours a week of leading, organizing students to volunteer in buildings that police and government officials were not allowed to enter without bulletproof vests because at least 60% of the units had one family member involved in the crack trade. We didn't have any bulletproof vests. We just had the goodwill of the neighbors that we served, replacing crumbling plaster with sheetrock, convincing them to pay rent again so we could get loans to fix the roof. My mom grew up in the public housing projects of Baltimore. These projects are now famous. McCullough Homes, where she grew up, if you ever watch The Wire, is known as the low-rises. And my grandmother helped lift our family out of poverty, ultimately by becoming a social worker and rising to be one of the first black women in Maryland state government. She led the implementation of the war on poverty for the state of Maryland and trained Barbara Mikulski, the future senator, as a social worker. And so I have great respect for the work you do, and today I'm going to speak to you as somebody who both carries the history of his family with him, has worked right on the front lines of social justice, and now it's back with the Sierra Club, the other organization of my childhood, seeking to help build a new economy in America fueled by our great green future of renewables and electric vehicles and batteries. A lot of that's relevant here in Washington State. Governor Inslee certainly has been a leader in that. But let me take you back for a second. You know, I was admittedly not quite 21 myself. I was at a friend's 21st birthday party in college. And a round of toasts went up to celebrate our boy who was turning 21. And then After a moment of silence, as everybody kind of composed themselves and thought about our friend and his accomplishments, somebody toasted the fact that one more of us had made it to 21. One more black man in America, one more brown man in America had made it to 21. I couldn't lift my glass on that last toast. The motion cut me like a knife. The notion that somebody thought it an accomplishment in this, the world's wealthiest democracy, for any member of any group, let alone somebody of my race, my gender, to simply survive, like breathe past 21, sent me reeling. And I did. I lost sleep, I was distracted in class, and I ultimately did what I was blessed to be able to do until about 2 years ago when my grandmother died at 105. I went to my grandma's kitchen table and I sat down and I just said, "Grandma, what happened? Grandma, you said that we were children of the dream, that all the great dragons have been slain, Jim Crow, slavery, that all we had to do was keep our nose clean and walk a straight line and everything would turn out great. Study hard, don't break the rules, everything will be okay." And Grandma, that's worked well for many of us. I was in a fancy college at the time. I said, but I'm not sure it's worked well for most of us. My generation, black men in America, we had woken up to find ourselves the most incarcerated people on the planet, most murdered in the country. My grandmother looked at me and she said, "Baby, what can I say? We got what we fought for, but we lost what we had. We got what we fought for, but we lost what we had." She said, talking about black folks in America, she said, we got the right to live in any community we wanted to, buy any house we could afford, but we lost the right to assume our communities would be safe. We got the right to teach at any school, send our kid to any school in America, but we lost the right to assume that they would be welcomed and loved the way my grandmother was at the one-room schoolhouse her grandfather built for his children and grandchildren coming out of slavery, or the segregated public school my mom attended in West Baltimore. She said, and we lost land. Black people in America lost 500 to 1,000 acres per day, every year, from the start of World War II until the end of the Cold War, and black land laws only slowed down in the 90s because there wasn't much land left to lose. Now, that conversation forced me as a young man to figure out what I was going to fight for. I've been raised not to be a fighter. I've been raised to believe that everything would be okay. But seeing the world crumble around me made it real clear that I needed to fight too. And that journey has taught me that we win biggest, we win best, when we presume that anybody could be our ally, that we talk to everybody like they have a heart, they have a brain, and they know right from wrong. I got challenged early on. I was down in Mississippi. They were trying to turn a public the governor of Mississippi, a man named Kirk Fordyce, a really unmitigated SOB. Announced he was going to take the state's 3 public historically black colleges, turn one into a prison, Mississippi Valley State. That would be Jerry Rice's alma mater if you know your 49ers football at all. He would take Alcorn State, the team that produced the legendary black NFL quarterback Steve McNair, and shut it down completely. And he would take Jackson State, the university that gave us Walter Payton, and make it majority white. And if you asked him where the black students would be, he said, I'm going to raise the overall entrance requirements of the university system so high that more than half of them won't be able to get in. And I entered that fight, me, Stacey Abrams, Derek Johnson, who leads the NAACP now. We were all college kids outraged and working together to organize against that governor. And I volunteered to be the one in Mississippi. Stacey was organizing universities in Atlanta. Derek had left Mississippi for Texas and was organizing students between Mississippi and Texas. We would produce what would be the largest march on the governor's mansion since 1972, when students were shot and killed by the National Guard at Jackson State, the same week they were shot and killed in Ohio, if you know your Neil Young. And 10 soldiers. And along the way, I found myself in a situation where my organizers had gone up to Mississippi State University in the town where Johnny Cash had been arrested for picking a daisy, Starksville, and arrested by the man who they said was the deputy who had arrested Johnny Cash, and that had fueled his campaign as the most law and order man in Mississippi, because, man, if you will arrest, Johnny Cash, you have to understand, was like second only to Elvis and third only to Jesus in Mississippi in the late 1960s. And if you're the sheriff's deputy who arrests that guy for picking a daisy, who won't you arrest? And that had made Dolph Bryant sheriff, Starksville, and we were all appropriately afraid of that man. But a team of organizers had volunteered to go up there because Earth Day, which I understand started right here, was coming up. And man, if you got to find some white liberal allies in Mississippi, it's hard every day of the year except for Earth Day. It's like Groundhog Day for white liberals in Mississippi, man. They come out, every other day of the week. They're dressed like me. You wouldn't know. They're in Brooks Brothers or whatever. But on Earth Day, they're in tie-dyes and Birkenstocks, and they all get together in the same place. Self-identify. But they asked to speak at the end, and they didn't realize that there was a concert coming on after, and that the crowd would turn into a frat party. And so instead of speaking at 3 o'clock, they were held there till 11 p.m., and when they got up to speak, the tie-dyes had dispersed, and the frat baseball caps had shown up, and the crowd started chanting, "Get a rope. Get a rope, get a rope, get a rope, get a rope." And I had fallen asleep at my desk waiting for them to check in, worried, because to get to Starksville, you got to drive past Philadelphia, Mississippi, where the head of the Shriners was the former sheriff who called the Klan to deliver Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner to them to have them lynched in 1964. Still not a nice place, even in the 1990s. And so that road was treacherous for civil rights organizers, and we didn't know what had happened. But at 2 a.m., my phone rang, and now I had to decide, do I pick it up because it might be my organizers, or do I leave it down because every other night around this town, the Ku Klux Klan was calling me? Byron De La Beckwith was on trial 30 years too late. If you haven't seen the movie if you've seen the movie Ghosts of Mississippi, this was that time. This was that trial. Byron De La Beckwith was on trial 30 years too late for assassinating Medgar Evers, and the Klan was a little upset. And they had put out a press release. I didn't know that they actually did press releases. But they put out a press release saying that they were going to assassinate the organizers of that march, young Stacey Abrams, young Derek Johnson, young Ben Jealous, if Byron De La Beckwith went to prison. But my organizers were missing, so I picked up the phone, and I heard the voice I was hoping to hear, and he said, Ben, we had some trouble up in Starksville. Could you meet us at the Waffle House down on I-55? We got to talk it through. Well, you can see from my size, Any city in America where a Waffle House exists, I can get there in 5 minutes flat. It's good. It's good 24 hours a day. And I was a vegetarian in Mississippi, so it was like, that was the only spot often I could eat. So I'm there in 5 minutes. I walk through the door. I order my double pecan waffle and my hash brown scattered and burned. And I slide into the booth and I say, fellas, what happened? And they explain about the shift in the crowd and the chanting, get a rope. And it was like a cold breeze hit our necks. We all look around at the same time. And at this Waffle House, it was situated between a black university, historically black, Jackson State, and historically white colleges like Millsaps and Belhaven. It was usually a very integrated crowd, but this night, now getting there 3 o'clock in the morning, we were the only black folks in the restaurant. Everybody else was white, not even a dishwasher or a cook. It's black. And there was an old white guy with white feathered hair and gold rings on every finger, staring at us, not smiling, just looking over his shoulder at us, staring at us. And I previously established that Waffle House exists for human obesity. The to-go bags back then were grocery bags, and each one of them he was carrying out, they probably had 20,000 calories in it, and he's walking back to feed some army through the restaurant, and he walks right to our table, and he says, "You all the boys I've been seeing on television? Well, I had been raised in California. Parents' marriage had been against the law in Maryland. One of the fellas was raised in New Orleans, the other one St. Louis, the other one Chicago. Ain't none of us accustomed to being called boy by an old white guy at 3 o'clock in the morning, let alone answering. But I've been getting death threats for a couple of weeks. They got death threats to their face that night, and ain't no other black folks in the restaurant, so we make the only logical response, yes, sir." And he says, "Hold on a minute." And he goes to turn around and put down these grocery bags, full of everything bad for you that tastes really good. And one of my organizers was a running back on the football team and a little wound tight. And he keeps pointing. And I realize he's pointing at the fact that the man's shirt is hanging like my coat about 9 inches below his waistband. And Mississippi was a right to carry state. $100, no felonies, pretty easy to get a concealed carry permit back then, and we couldn't tell whether he had a gun or not. And given the general context, Felix, my lead organizer, wanted to disarm him forcibly. And I was just like, and he was about to get up, and so I used what little positional power I had as the organizer, and I hit my hand on the table and I said, "Fellas, let's hear what the man has to say." And Felix gave me this look like, "Man, if he shoots us and he don't shoot you, our mothers will finish the job." And so we all watched his hand. It was like in slow motion, around his girth, just coming like this. And he goes, "Well, I just want to shake your hand. Man, if I've been born an N-word in this crazy state, I'd be mad as heck too." This was 1993. He said, "Now, I don't know why y'all stopped fighting back 25 years ago. That was the year King was assassinated. But man, if you need anything, you just come find me. I own the used car lot." That explained the 8 gold rings. "I own the used car lot right down Highway 49. If you need anything, if you need money, if you need a car, if you need people for that crazy march of yours, well, you just come see me." And so the next morning, we got up. We slept a little easier that night than we had planned on, we thought we would. Next morning, we got up and we assessed the situation. What went well the day before when we sent all those teams out to Earth Day? What mistakes did we make? And we agreed that one mistake that we had made was we assumed to our allies always would be. We batted about 900 on Earth Day, but made one big mistake. And we had assumed that we knew who our ally definitely wouldn't be, an old white guy staring at us at Waffle House at 3 o'clock in the morning, that we almost jumped, searching for a gun he may not have had. It certainly wasn't relevant. And we decided that from that day on, we would just stop assuming. We would start talking to everybody. And Mississippi is loaded with assumptions. You land as an organizer in the state, and you were told that 90% of the media you should not engage because at that point, just 20 years, less than 20 years earlier, up until about 1980, those media outlets were still championing bringing back segregation. And we went to all of them. And we saw the media shift before our eyes because we spoke to all of them. We discovered that the television reporters weren't even from Mississippi. They were like from Chicago, trying to work their way to New York by going through, the smallest markets. And the ones who were understood, that it was weird and unfortunate and unacceptable that the black colleges, students had to buy their own toilet paper, but at the white colleges, they were issued their own toilet paper. It wasn't even a thing, it was just in the bathroom. But man, if you, my phone's calling 911 on my other phone, I'll turn that off. And so, but if your mother came to visit you at Jackson State and she wanted to use the restroom, you would have to hand her a roll of toilet paper to walk down the hallway. They so underfunded the schools. They taught teaching there out of textbooks because they didn't have enough money to fix the pool. Professor died at Mississippi Valley State because the ambulance didn't work, even though they had 6,000 people at football games every weekend in the fall. And so on. And then just going all the way to the logical extent and turning Mississippi Valley State into a prison wouldn't just be un-American, it'd be un-Mississippian. And when that march showed up, that was an interracial march. It wasn't just a black student march. And it sent a signal to the country and the courts that had to make a decision about the fate of those schools. And all 3 schools are still open. They have more money, and they're thriving. Now, as leaders, we have to get up on the balcony of history where my grandma lived at the end of her life every day and recognize some things. Recognize that we're all connected, that misery in America runs in cycles, sometimes sequentially, sometimes simultaneously. As black folks in America were losing their land, white small farmers, in fact, small farmers of every color across America were losing their land too. And before that happened, Native Americans were dispossessed of their land. When I was researching my book, Never Forget Our People Were Always Free, it's selling for cheap on Amazon right now because the paperback's a little delayed in coming out. There's just a few left of the hardback. What was driving me to do that, to research that book, was a forgotten chapter of history, the kind that they didn't want taught in the 20th century, where my grandmother's grandfather in Virginia led black Republicans in the state to join with former white Democrats, working class, who had fled the Democratic Party, then the Conservative Party, after Reconstruction, when the old plantation owners were taking control of the state again and asserted that because of the weight of the Civil War debt, they would have to shut down the free public schools, all of them. And they did that, that kind of common wisdom math that really defies both the statistics and common sense. They just assumed, well, if black-led government started these free public schools, all we're going to hurt is black folks. It's the same type of math that leads people to believe that most poor people in America are black when there's 8 million and change blacks in poverty and 16 million and change whites in poverty, not to mention Native Americans, Latinos, Asian Americans. And well, the base of the Democratic Party in Virginia depended on those free public schools at that point in history. They've been around for 10 years. And everybody understood, white and black, that what the plantations really feared, what the plantation owners really feared was an educated electorate. And so they founded these white working class men, former Confederate war soldiers, not officers, because you bought your commission back then, so you didn't have a horse and a bunch of money, you weren't going to be an officer, it didn't matter how smart you were. Former Confederate soldiers, their neighbors and descendants, formed a party called the Readjusters. Their name came from their demand: readjust the terms of the Civil War debt so we can keep our free public schools. And my grandmother's grandfather was one of the few kind of top leaders of black Republicans in Virginia who were upset with their own party because President Rutherford B. Hayes, trying to hold the country together, had removed federal protection from the South for black communities and unleashed the terror of the Ku Klux Klan. So, the party wasn't worth much if our own president would betray us. And so he approached the Readjusters and he said, yeah, we want to keep those schools too. We started them. And y'all ain't got enough votes to do nothing. So why don't you let blacks in this party? We'll take over the state and we'll save the schools. And that's what they did in Virginia from 1881 to 1885. Interracial party, roughly half white, half black, takes control of both houses of the state legislature, the governorship, and appoints both U.S. senators. They abolish the poll tax, abolish the public whipping post, radically expand Virginia Tech to make it what we know it to be today, the working person's answer to the very patrician University of Virginia, and establish what would Virginia Normal Institute, now called Virginia State University, the first publicly supported institution for the training of black teachers south of the Mason-Dixon. And in 4 years, they quadrupled the number of black teachers. And to this day, the state is defined by the victories of their very short-lived tenure. Virginia is really defined by having some of the best public schools in the country. They saved that system. And having some of the best public universities in the country. They built 2 of them into what they are today. And then they were put down by tactics we might recognize from our own political times. Disinformation, vile, racist, mind-bendingly dumb disinformation that people still believed. Racism, violence, and a call to white supremacy. And then they were ripped out of the history books by what followed Jim Crow governments. And the history of the Readjusters was not taught in Virginia until the 21st century, for more than 100 years. And the Library of Virginia is just doing its first research on the Readjusters right now. Interesting side note, when the Readjusters were defeated, what was the first order of business? Reimposing the poll tax. Sent me back to figure out why. Answer was real simple. Not only did it dispossess 80% of black people from their votes, but fully 50% of whites. Imagine if you had just been taught that as a kid. The poll tax was about crushing coalitions, multiracial coalitions to improve the lives for working people. You were just taught, probably like I was, it was just about the black vote, but it was half of the white vote, the half that had joined the Readjuster Party, the half that had given birth to the Confederate soldiers. They didn't care about them either. No, when we talk about social justice, when we talk about public institutions, we have to recognize we're all in this together and we always have been. I mean, think about it. Where do most Americans live today? First time I came to Washington State, I was campaigning as spokesperson for the Student Environmental Action Coalition with the president of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers against NAFTA. 1994. We said, you pass NAFTA with all these other bills, GATT, WTO, permanent normal trade relations with China, you will gut American manufacturing. And you will send the factories to countries that will not enforce environmental regulations. You will impoverish our people and poison their countries faster. And we were called Chicken Little. The Chicken Little duo. Derided. And yet I turned 21 that year, so my entire adult life, I've watched America shut down 65,000 factories. That's enough for every town and city in America. It's the landscape of much of Spokane. And so most Americans now live at the same address, not the rich ones, not the well-educated ones necessarily, but like the average American now lives at the same address. What is that address? I live where there used to be a factory, and when it shut down, what shot up? Poverty, despair, misery, opiates, meth. That's where most Americans live. And you ask yourself, why are we such a divided nation? Well, you can't explain Brexit in England without the deindustrialization of the UK and England in particular. And you can't explain the toxicity in American politics without the deindustrialization of our nation. On the white side, I come from folks in Maine who worked in textile mills and a few who built them. And it's not that our family doesn't own or operate or work in textile mills in Maine, it's that nobody does anymore. And on the black side, we worked in steel plants at places like Bethlehem Steel's outpost in Baltimore. It's the same story. And so what do we do now? Well, first, we have to recognize we're all in the same boat. These walls of race they like us to imagine are just that. It's one country, it's one state, it's one community, and we rise or fall together. Next, we have to understand the formula that really made America great after World War II, made America rise after World War II, lifted all boats coming out of the Great Depression. Our government supports our industry to follow the science, understand where it's headed when it comes to products, when it comes to improving people's lives, and then move like Wayne Gretzky and skate where the puck is going. And get there first and lead the economy. And then as we design great things, which we still do, and we invent great inventions, which we still do, we get back to doing what we used to do. We build them here. We make them here. We provide a pathway for all those Americans who won't go to college, can't afford to go to college, or went to college and got nothing but debt out of it. A way to make a good living with their hands, operating machines. And I'm here to say, brothers and sisters, that future is closer than we realize. I just got back from Dalton, Georgia. If you hear about Dalton on the news, it's usually because Marjorie Taylor Greene, their local congresswoman, is holding a press conference saying something that usually defies the facts. That's all I'll say about Marjorie Taylor Greene. You can Google her. As my adopted Jewish aunt would say, oy vey. But there I am in what might be the most divisively divided district in all of American politics, at the Q-Cells solar panel factory, where there are 1,800 workers on the floor, where these manufacturing jobs multiply by 4 in the local economy. So those 1,800 mean 9,000. And they're about to open up a second facility in Cartersville, just down the road, like 8 minutes on a country road. And that will bring the total to 5,000, and that will multiply to 20,000 in the local economy. Vendors, suppliers, janitors, all that. And the factory floor looks like America today. You got white men with 12-inch beards getting out of deer hunting sticker-covered trucks. You got Latino guys and gals rolling in. Literally, one of them had a Mexican flag that must have been 6 feet tall and 8 feet long flying from the back of their truck. You got lots of black folks. You got Asian Americans. You got execs from everywhere all milling about. And of course, you got a lot of robots too. Looks like America today. Don't get in the way of the robot. Told that many times. And you see it, and it's, for me, right? It comes from people who worked in factories and built factories, but has only ever seen them shut down in his adult life. It was like a dream. And I almost missed the art on the wall as I walked out, and I stopped and I said to a local woman whose family's been in manufacturing there for generations, making rugs. Dalton was the rug capital, the carpet capital of America, still is. Biggest employment losses during during COVID of any community because, if you're not building houses, you're not making carpet. And people very excited that there's now 2 industries in Dalton. And on the wall, there were these pictures, and I said, Lisa, what are these pictures? She said, that's the annual Earth Day competition. We ask the kids every year, it's the same question, same prompt for the contest, portray your parents going to work. And I'd heard from the factory workers that they stand a little taller around Dalton because they feel like they have more of a purpose now making solar panels than they did making carpet. They're helping to save the planet. But you look at this rainbow of art created by the rainbow that is their children across every political divide, every ethnic and racial divide in Dalton. In 201, the kids portrayed their parents as heroes saving our planet. And you thought, and I couldn't help but think, wow, this is how we save America. This is how we save America. We've never stopped inventing great things, but we stopped making them. And we divided our nation into 2 nations, a very small one, very elite, very educated, for whom there will always be some type of opportunity, and another one that has gone from knowing their kids could get a good union job like them and be able to buy maybe a little shack out on the lake or a sailing skiff in addition to a small house and live a dignified life, to hoping that they get a job at Walmart, knowing that unless they become a manager, it won't provide any of that for them. But the good news is the entire way Earth is powered will be transformed in most of our lifetimes. And that means a lot of industry. That means a lot of building. It means a lot of changes, and it means a huge opportunity to follow in the path of the Inflation Reduction Act and start opening factories across America again. So what does that have to do with you as leaders? Well, houses, homes ultimately exist on land at the whim of the economy. The work that you're doing is hard work, and you need allies. And if we were sitting around the lunch table kind of talking about, what do we do? One, I would say this. Make sure that you are on mission, that the work you're doing brings you joy and charges you to charge forward every day because it's hard. And it's a privilege to serve your neighbors. When I left my grandma's house that day, I got back on the bus and I decided, wow, I needed to learn a lot of history, but more than anything, I needed to figure out what I would fight for. And I've been raised not to fight, so I took out a sheet of paper and I wrote down everything on it that really upset me about the state of my community, my country, my people, my state. And if something went on there that was worse or more compelling than something else, I crossed off the something else, and eventually I had 6 things, and I had to pick one, and so I turned over the sheet of paper, and I wrote them at random, and I closed my eyes, and I spun the sheet of paper, I drew a circle, because my grandfather always said, never let the perfect be the enemy of the good, Benjamin. Never let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Just pick something, boy. They're all good. And so I said, whatever's most in the middle of this circle of the 6 things that were left on the back side of the sheet, written at random, I'll just pick that. And what appeared in that circle is what led me to Mississippi. It's what led me to be head of the NAACP. It's what led me to lead the Sierra Club. And if you haven't ever done that exercise for yourself, I teach leadership at the University of Pennsylvania. I have my students do it every year. It changes their lives. And if housing or anything related to it's in that circle for you, then you're in the right seat. And if you're not, you should consider moving to a different seat where you will have more passion, because you're clearly a fighter if you're in this work. And fighters got to wake up every day ready to fight. And if the fight's wearing you down, let somebody else fight this fight while you go fight the fight that's more in the center of your heart. But assuming everybody's there, what's the next thing we do? We talk to everybody like they're allies. We don't assume that because they're rich or because they're a different political party or because they voted this way or that way last time, that they won't understand the need to do the right thing this time. And yes, a lot of people in politics, you all exist in that world too, lack courage. It's true. As Dr. King said, it's always the right time to do the right thing, and you got to give people, I would add, the chance, even if they did wrong yesterday, to do right today. And you are here doing right. In addition to talking to everybody that's an ally, as folks who are involved in conversations about community economic development, encourage your allies around the table who work on different aspects of it to join with you in re-envisioning how we lift all boats in this community. Because housing costs something. And the more money people have in their pockets, the easier it is to solve the crisis that you guys are all confronting. Yes, the crisis that you're confronting has something to do with those 65,000 factories shutting down too. And in America, we make this country better for the next generation in every generation. And we've struggled for a couple generations. But if we do things like, yes, understand that the cure to homelessness is a house. Understand that the cure to poverty is better jobs. Understand that the purpose of education for our kids is to set them up to get a good job when they come out, so they can afford that house. Insist that our local schools connect their vision for our children to the jobs that will be in our community when they exit. And if we start raising kids again to believe that work you do with your hands is honorable work, and maybe hip them to the fact that the local plumber is making like 6 times more than the person at Starbucks, and the person at Starbucks may have a PhD and $250,000 in educational debt, then we can get back to living to living together in a nation where hope rises, where the divided past fades, and where we all follow Dr. King's wisdom, that we're all connected in a single garment of destiny, and we're better off if we act like it. God bless.
Thank you so much, Ben. That was an amazing and dynamic presentation about humanity and civility. Left us with a lot to consider. We can thank you enough for joining us here at Housing Washington. We will now head into our final set of sessions for the conference, but don't skip out early. You will not want to miss the hearing and the inside scoop of our favorite Washington, D.C. insider, David Bradley. Nick Federici will join David for an informative and insightful Q&A. He's going to tap on him to share some information about what he thinks about the upcoming elections, as well as tell us about the housing initiatives to anticipate in 2025. Best of all, you have a chance to ask David your own political questions, those burning questions that you maybe couldn't ask your friend, but you can ask the person who may have the answer. We'll see you all back here at 12:15 for our final lunch buffet and keynote address. So have a great morning, everyone. Look forward to seeing you later on this afternoon. Take care.